Welcome.
So today
Welcome.
we actually have, unbeknownst to probably most of our thousands and thousands and thousands of viewers, we actually have a book coming out called The Collective Mindset. And we're going to talk a little bit about the collective mindset. Dr. Bernardo actually has a Twitter chat tonight around this with Codebreaker, correct, Rich?
Yes, 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Perfect, great. So we're going with the collective mindset. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we're really going to focus on one component or one area of the collective mindset. It's a pretty complex model. So over the next few weeks, we're going to really dig into that, and we hope that you start to understand what it's about, what we want to do with the collective mindset. We have evolving conversations about what the model means, what the model represents. We just were talking about ecosystem and culture and how this intertwines with that. And we'll likely talk about that in an upcoming podcast. But anyone want to take a crack at the collective mindset, what it means? And maybe we'll each take a crack at this. Anthony, we'll start with you. I'll put you on the spot. What does the collective mindset mean to you, as because we've worked with this with districts? We wrote a book on this, so it's pretty evolved over the past couple of years. So what does it mean to you, this collective mindset model that we're pushing forth?
As we work through the understanding and the implementation of the collective mindset, what comes to me in terms of understanding, and that is, it's a comprehensive process. And I think it is a process, despite the fact that we have set components and parts. It's a process that can be used and utilized to move an organization from point A to a point that they want it to be. So from the simplistic standpoint, when we look at organizations, say, where are we? Where do we want to go? How do we want to get there? I think that the mindset does two things. I think it actually does all three things. I think it helps the people of the organization to understand where they are. I think it helps them develop, to use Rich's term all the time, preferable future or futuring for that organization. But it also presents a means and method to get there. So to me, it's the entire package, not just part of it. It helps people understand their values and cultures and where they are about a school or an organization. It helps them to come together collectively to think through where they want that organization to go or be. Because the end result of the collective mindset, is continuous transformation. It helps them to really understand, well, what does that mean? But even more than that, it helps them get there with the operationalizing the concepts of action research, collaborative inquiry, evaluation. So that's what it really means to me. It's one of the most comprehensive models of change that I've ever experienced or seen.
Rich?
Yeah, there's not much to add to what Dr. Renuncia's put together. Just a couple of points. One would be, first of all, to come back to Anthony's last point, there's a lot of models about change out there. What people don't necessarily scrape back that often is the premise that when people do that, when people examine those things, they're coming from some sort of mindset, some kind of silent cultural basic belief about what they think groups and organizations are all about. And what the collective mindset model is, and when Al has a chance to show it, you'll see that there are quite a few moving parts, and we'll treat them as simply as we can today. Now, we're looking at an understanding that how we conceive, and we think correctly conceive, of really approaching this from at least two dimensions. And one would be to get the individuals to recognize the value of what I call the worth sense of how to engage each other to co-create a new reality that embraces a set of change circumstances, and somehow embeds that with what the organization will come to collectively realize. And that's pretty heady existential stuff. But really, if we go about trying to use a formulaic, first you do this and first you do that approach, that's where many of these models are doomed to fail. Because in effect, it's an organic model, which depends on the evolution of the individuals that make up the group, as well as the group itself having the capacity to make up itself.
Yeah, to add to both of what you're saying, I agree with what you both say, but I think for me, like if you do like a 30,000-foot view of the collective mindset, it's about the synergy of all these components that you're talking about, right? It's about almost layering what exists with what needs to happen, and looking at it cohesively. So for us, like we look at the culture, but not often do you have a model or a system in place that will take into account culture, ecosystem, individuals, groups, and have them kind of work collectively, cohesively. One of the big takeaways that I get from the working with districts is when we implement or start to implement this model, there's very little touch point time where administrators even come together and have conversations about where they want to be, where they want to go. So for us, it's been really great experience with the collective mindset, knowing that we're bringing people together, we're starting to have conversations, and then we're shaping those conversations to, like Anthony said, help them get to where they want to be. So with the collective mindset, we're not going to share the whole model with you today, but we do want to share, and I did a quick graphic on this, we have what are called the focus areas of the collective mindset. So once you look at all the cultural aspects, the ecosystem, the culture, what exists in the district, we go to these focus areas and we work with the groups synergistically to look at each of these focus areas. And Rich, you have actually tonight on Twitter, this is one of the questions you're going to ask. And we want people to sort of rank these areas of the collective mindset in importance. I've set up the graphic so we can kind of do sliders as we talk, and we could raise one up, push one down kind of thing. But I want to share that graphic and then just have a conversation about each of these areas. Maybe we'll do a really quick explanation of these areas for those who don't know what we mean by them. And then do our own personal ranking, and we'll put it out to the group to say, hey, where would you rank these focus areas of the collective mindset? And in addition, is there another area that's not in here that you guys think should be in here? Because this is ever evolving. If you looked at the collective mindset 2 years ago, it was very different than what we have today in this model that we've created. All right, so I'm going to actually share my screen. Rich or Anthony, you want to just going through quickly these components, these 5 focus areas? Can everybody see that? Yeah.
Yep.
So real quick, Anthony, you want to just go quickly through those top ones?
Sure. What we've done over the course of the evolution, I would say, as you just mentioned, collective mindset, is to look at the fundamental or foundational aspects of an organization that need not just attention, but that need to be developed and cultivated in order to move again toward that high achieving, transformational organization where it's continuous improvement and cultural development. And so we've come up with these 5 foundational theoretical constructs, for lack of a better term. Systems thinking, which has been around for a long time. The concept of shared vision and mission and goals, again, something that most people in leadership or leadership positions are familiar with. Collaborative leadership, this thought that leadership is no longer a top-down process, but one that requires collaboration and cooperation among different groups in an organization. And one that's somewhat relatively new, approach is design thinking. The application of design thinking, which has been applied to business, but not as much yet to the educational organizations that we deal with. And of course, last, the collegiality and building of community, going back to the concept of ecology and ecosystems. The people who work in these organizations cannot consider themselves in a vacuum. They must understand their relationship to their environment. So the one thing I think the collective mindset has done, and that is to not just look at these as silos, to not just take one approach or another, but to take this approach collectively together and focus on each of these areas when trying to move an organization to its preferable future.
So, Rich, let's give you a crack at sort of ranking these, and they're all the synergy of the collective mindset weighs these as equally as we can, right? But I think there is sort of I think everybody's going to have an opinion on the ranking order of these in importance as far as moving to where you want to be in an organization and within an educational organization. So, Rich, what would you say is your top one here as far as most important in ranking?
There's two ways to look at this. There's one in a certain sense. One would be, to which is the priority one, which is the predictor, the one that you need to have for the other ones to fall into line. And the other way to look at it too would be to see to what extent do some of these things exist. So the importance versus the existence may not necessarily be in the same place.
Right.
In my mind, I'm going to stick my foot in my mouth and go with design thinking. I'm going to surprise you all.
All right. So
design thinking.
We're going to move design thinking up a little bit
Move that guy up a little bit up the ladder, right?
Yeah.
Design thinking speaks to mindset as much as a set of skills. Design thinking is about, for want of a better term, creative thinking, lateral thinking, flexible thinking. And not only this speaks to the skill, but also speaks to the extent to which it's nurtured and respected. If the assistant principal stands up and says, well, I'm against suspension because I don't think it works. I think we should do away with suspending students except in the most severe, matters of health and safety. For the most part, I'm going on a limb and saying she would be laughed out of the room on that, because that's a very unconventional set of thinking for a lot of people. Where another leader would say, well, okay, let's understand what you're driving at. And let's give that some chance to breathe and get some sunlight so we can play around with it. That's what creative thinking is. Your design thinking makes room for forgive the term, right brain thinking that often is because of people's mindsets, also often because of their inability to think that way, and often because the culture doesn't permit it, and sometimes because the time factors kick in, not particularly nurtured. So the rhetorical question I would say is, to what extent does the building you work in, or the one that you lead, or the district that you lead, really make room for true creative thinking, for development of some different ideas? Were that in place and a routine part of the conversation, clearly collegiality would slide with that,
So
and collaboration.
You're gonna put that as your number two?
Yeah, I guess so. And I
And
think
then
it would also anticipate collaborative leadership.
So we're going to go collaborative leadership as your number three. And how about let's finish it out with the 4 or 5.
Well, I think systems is the answer to all prayers, but I'm going to put that last and move shared vision, because if I have shared vision, then I can collaborate. If I have shared vision, I can design think. If I have collegiality, I can design think even better. But in the end, if we're going to build new cultures, we need design thinkers.
Excellent. All right, Anthony, to you.
What do you
I'm
think?
going to throw a little monkey wrench in this by saying that I look at this not necessarily as a rank or ranking in order of importance, but more so ranking when throughout the collective mindset
All right,
process,
that's good. Yeah.
um, these things become important and significant and require focus. So, for me, and Rich just made a point about the shared vision, mission, and goals. To me, that smacks of culture. And I don't think that you can begin these other processes of change and transformation without really understanding where everyone is from a cultural perspective, from an assumption, belief, and value perspective. Um, and I think the process of shared vision and mission and goals requires, and I use the word cathartic, a cathartic process, to move from what we, again, have, what we think we have, how we view and our perceptions of what we have, and then where we want to go. I think when you're talking about, moving from point A to the preferable future, I don't think you can do it without understanding your values and your vision, and what needs to be changed in terms of recognizing your preferable future. So to me, I still believe that is probably the most important piece and the one that you need to begin with in the process.
And then what would be a 2, 3, 4, 5, you think, as far as the process goes?
I think the second piece to me would be, and I probably would rank them the same: collaborative leadership and collegiality and building community. Because I think that if you're going to transform an organization, one of the means and methods of doing that, after you've had this deep understanding of your cultural values, and that is, how do we now work collaboratively in order to begin moving in the direction that we want to, that preferable future, and also recognizing that we just don't serve children, say, give you an example of a school, but we serve an entire community. So I see those almost as equal, working together on collaborative leadership, but collegiality and community building. Next thing I think is the design thinking, because what does the design look like? Both in terms of the change process and in terms of what we want to accomplish in the organization, what we want to move to in the organization. And I think that design thinking requires collaborative leadership. It requires an understanding of shared vision. And I think it requires that collegiality and community building. And the last piece, and again, I'm agreeing with Rich, as he said, systems thinking is the panacea to moving this along. I think then that's the next piece. So I almost look at it in terms of a timeline as opposed to a ranking.
Little bit, but yeah. Okay. All right. So as a timeline. So for me, and I agree with that, because I think as we look at this and ranking of the focus areas I think it's important to look at how much they impact things, right? And the immediate impact versus long-term impact. So there's a lot of layers to this.
Yeah.
But I do like with the collective mindset in particular, we are hitting all of these areas. But if we do still look at it as like, hey, if you miss this, you're done with this process. Like it's just not going to work. Versus some maybe a little bit lighter areas than others. So I am actually going to go with shared vision, mission, and goals, as you do, because I think that's the foundation. So we're going to give that a big bump. I'm going to go with the collaborative leadership piece. For me is up there, maybe even on par with shared vision, mission, and goals for me, because you can't. There's too much siloing in educational organizations. There's very little, like I said, face time where people are actually talking to each other and understanding how things are sort of intertwined, and they don't even have that as a base, as a foundation. So I think those are really key components here. But in order to get to the point of that collective mindset, that continuous innovation and change, I think I'm actually going to, systems thinking, I think is probably my least. So I'm just going to bump that up a little bit. But again, for design thinking and collegiality and building community, I think they go hand in hand, but I think I'm going to bump up design a little more, and then collegiality, which is really close behind it in my view. That gets bumped up too as my fourth, and then fifth is the systems thinking. I don't think you can get to the place you want to go without that design thinking mindset, design thinking mentality. And in order to do that, you really have to understand the sense of community, how things impact one another. You have to have the collegiality. These all, as you look at this, it really does feed. They all feed each other in this process. So yeah, it looks like for us as a group, I think, Rich, you had design thinking as the top, but it's still pretty high up there. I think for me, the shared vision, mission, and goals, and Anthony, you too, is pretty high up there. You look at this collectively, what do you guys think of this as far as the ranking of sort of importance? Systems thinking didn't get a lot of love, and I'm curious about that too. But what are your thoughts on the overall picture, that what's sort of transpired here with us as an internal group?
I don't think that systems thinking, as you just said, didn't get a lot of love. I think that systems thinking becomes more prominent as we move through the process of change and transformation. But I wonder if even this is reflective of, as you set out, the relationship among all five of them. Because I think that's what's very, very significant, how they all relate to one another, how they all interact with one another, the interrelatedness of all five, as opposed to just ranking.
Rich?
Well, again, they all cut across each other. I mean, that's the 25 word or less answer. They all cut across each other, and so that kind of dictates the success of the whole with a W. Another way to look at it too is like the question I asked earlier was that to what extent do they exist in the organizations? Now, we've worked in, you and I, the three of us, and individually and together, have worked on a lot of change processes in our own professional lives and in different places. And I'm thinking of the places we are right now, but that and plus other ones. And so the question becomes to me is, which ones don't exist? I take it from a deficit model for a minute, but which are the weak ones, and which are the ones that you have to, bulk up in order for the whole with a W to be more robust? That's why I think I pushed the design thinking premise, because my own experiential, anecdotal feeling is that design thinking is not particularly nurtured or respected, at least consciously as such.
Mm.
I think this is going to make for really a good conversation, hopefully after this podcast and with the Twitter chat as well, because even us who've come up with this model, this process, I mentioned early, it's ever evolving, and we're constantly having conversations around this. But I think it's important for educators to have these conversations, to challenge what we're talking about. Even Anthony, as you said, is it a rank, or is it just an order of what should come first or prioritize? How do these things intertwine, as you were just saying, Rich? I think that's the conversation that needs to happen. Rich, I think we mentioned off air, like, we're not sure how many administrators are thinking this way. And if we had to guess, it wouldn't be too many. And that's none of us are negative, or we're pretty positive as far as change in education. And as we're doing this, inspiring change in education. But we also have a ton of experience between the three of us, and we see with our eyes here what is going on out there. And for the most part, these conversations are not happening. And this part of the hope, right? To have these conversations to see what is the right way to go about this. And we think the collective mindset is, but it's ever evolving for sure.
Now, Sharma said that energy follows direction. And if I'm a superintendent or a school leader of any sort, is my direction influenced by the world out there, who might have a different opinion about how life should be in the education valley. And does that diminish my ability to, and it's not an original word, to reflect, to have the time to reflect and to co-reflect with people to generate new direction, and therefore shift the energy towards something more nearly effective and sustainable. It's kind of, I mean, understandably, I mean, especially in this COVID crisis, people aren't necessarily sitting there, reading the tea leaves about some of the things we're talking about, unfortunately, because they're too busy trying to deal with I can't think of a simpler word, the exigencies of what's going on the last 6 months plus. And so we're really not paying attention to leadership issues as much as we are to management issues.
That's well said. Well said.
Very well said.
We really need to be focusing on leadership to manage it appropriately, right? Anthony, closing thoughts?
I think Rich's comment reminded me of being in leadership positions, and something we had said even before we came on the air, and that is, I think one of the biggest challenges, not just we face, but schools face and reform efforts face, and that is to get leaders to think along these lines in a much more deeper capacity. Yeah, it's intellectual. Yes, sometimes it's a little, it's a little, what's the word? Deep in understanding. It's very abstract, I should say. But those abstractions, like the likes of Sharma and others, have translated that into actionable processes. And I think that's one of the things I think we're trying to do with the collective mindset, translate those abstract ideas that have always been floating around, but making them even more operational and more having the rubber hit the road and impact positively an institution.
Yeah, I think it makes, like you said, a lot of this stuff has been around for a long time, but making sense of it and forging sort of a concrete and clear path for organizations is what we are all about, what we want to do. And hopefully this and a number of podcasts and the book, when it comes out at the end of the year, beginning of next year, will help people get to that place and have a clear understanding of the path in which to get there. So thank you guys. Again, always great being on with you with Leadership Redefined. We will see everybody next week on the podcast, and have
Twitter tonight on Twitter,
and Twitter tonight. This will be on all our Twitter accounts, so you can watch this before the Twitter chat. But Rich is going to lead a Twitter chat with Code Breaker, who is actually publishing our book. So it's a great team there as well, and we're getting involved with a lot of things they're doing. So we'll see you tonight. What is it, Rich? 8 p.m. Eastern, correct?
yes.
And if you're a Yankee fan like us, you could do it while you're watching the game, right, Rich? Take